We took 9 of 2024's best performance cars onto Goodyear's incredible test track in the south of France to find out which one is best.
Welcome to Goodyear's Miraval test track and welcome to the 2024 Car Magazine Sports Car Giant Test.
This year the mix of cars is broader than ever before. We've got supercars, hot hatches, muscle cars, EV performance machines and even an extreme off-road buggy.
Remember, this isn't about sheer speed or performance, it's about pure driving enjoyment. Whichever car, regardless of price, puts the biggest smile on our face across the duration of this test shall be announced the winner. So, without further ado, let's get into the contenders, starting with the Porsche 911 ST.
Join me in the Porsche 911 ST, which is basically a 911 GT3 Touring that's been taken up a level. We've got the GT3 RS engine, 6-speed manual gearbox, and a more understated body. Now Porsche says this car is more optimized for the road rather than the circuit, but I tell you what, feels pretty good here at Miraval. It starts off with a perfect driving position with this car. You're really low down, but also very, very comfortable. This car looks cool as well because it's got the Heritage pack in it, but very, very comfortable at the core of all the action in here. And also, it just feels very, very stable and planted. As you get in, it's very confidence inspiring. Now, obviously, this 4-litre flat 6 from the GT3 RS dominates this experience. But it's got a couple of different things here that go along with it. One is shorter gear ratios from this 6-speed manual. It's a lovely stubby shift, but also shorter gear ratios. People always go on about GT3s and 911s generally having too longer gear ratios, but this chews through them a lot quicker, gives it a lot more energy. This engine, absolutely fantastic, 4-litre flat 6. And it's got the single mass flywheel. It's got so much rev, so much appetite for revs, this thing, as it goes up to 9,000, absolutely amazing. And because we've got the single mass flywheel, the revs are just flicking up. Extra energy on top of an already really, really feisty car. You know, 500 brake horsepower or so these days really doesn't sound like much, but it's all right when it's like this. You know, this is just exactly what you want. You want the car to dig in and find traction when you want it. But then when you want to play, it's all there, it's ready to go. Doesn't have rear wheel steering either, interestingly, in the ST. And they've had to change a few things for that. You feel it in tighter corners like that, maybe. It's still very, very agile, but it's in the longer corners, I think you notice it more. It's more reactive, it's less stable. Plus, it doesn't have the aero that you've got on a regular GT3 or even a GT3 RS. So it's just making me work pretty hard to stay on top of all this in a good way. loads of grip, but if you just turn it in, you can just feel it starting to rotate. Very, very feelsome. Really making me sweat this car now, making me work for it. But what a thing, I absolutely love it. Steering is absolutely fantastic. Super, super precise. Very stable in a straight line at the dead ahead. As soon as you turn it in, you know, it's a slightly slower rack, but just feels absolutely spot on. Now, I love PDK's dual clutch gearbox, but I think because Porsche does the manual so well, this shift is so nice. And this car is more road optimized. I think it suits this car perfectly. I love this car. It's absolutely my sort of thing. It's mechanical, it's feelsome, it's precise, and it's usable. I would absolutely buy one of these if I had a spare 200,000 plus. Absolutely amazing.
A suitably perspiring Ben very much confirms then that the 911 ST is indeed a bit of a masterpiece. So, what better way to follow it up than with an old foe of the 911? Welcome to the new Aston Martin Vantage.
Tell you what, they have absolutely thrown the horsepower at this thing. I remember when the Aston Martin Vantage was a naturally aspirated V8, it sounded phenomenal, responses were great, but it wasn't known for being that quick in a straight line. But now this thing is an absolute bullet train. It's got so much grunt, it revs, it just doesn't stop going. Whoa. And remember, this is the rival to the Porsche 911. It's the baby Aston Martin, but it is still absolutely ballistic. Although saying that, I'm not convinced that the track is going to be where it's at its best. It does weigh 1.7 tons. Okay, fine, there are heavier cars out there. There are heavier cars on this test, much heavier cars, but it feels its weight more than a Porsche 911 would. I can say that with a lot of confidence. Also, the steering, there's not quite the amount of bite that you want around the straight ahead position that then gives you that confidence that the car is really dialed in to the entry of the corner. The steering's quick, it feels very quick on road, but out here, yeah, there's just a little bit of vagueness there. Not the end of the world, but you do notice it. Having said that, it's all very well and good comparing it to the 911. It is its main rival, but you don't want it to be identical. It's got to have its own personality, and that's what this thing has in bucket loads. It is packed with character, it's packed with charm, and it's an awful lot of fun. It's got a really nice 50-50 weight distribution, which means that after a bit of practice, you can shift that weight around on the pedals and it does what you want it to. There's a bit of management going on, of course there is. There always is with cars that are a bit heavier, but once you get used to it, it's actually very good fun. And you can build up quite a nice rhythm. Of course, you can steer it with the throttle. It's an Aston Martin rear-wheel drive V8, but there is something to be said for trying to be neat and tidy with it. But it does reward you. Steering feel is okay, brake feel's okay. It's not standout around here, but it's plenty to work with. Oh, hello. And it does feel like it's on your side. It feels like it wants you to succeed, like it isn't going to take your head off if you take liberties with it. I would just like a little bit more feeling of what the tyres are doing on the road so I can better understand exactly how to get the best out of this. But, you know, I'm having a good time figuring that out. And honestly, just listen to it. Mega noise, really exciting. feel like James Bond. Probably don't look like it. I'm a sweaty mess at the moment, but woo. Oh. It's a big old girl, but it's plenty of fun. Tell you what though, I wish Aston Martin had fixed the typeface on the dials. I can barely see the gear that I'm in. I mean, the speed, it needs to be bigger, but it's not the end of the world. The gear though, need a big readout to show you what gear you're in. At the moment, it's just not clear when I'm going around the track. And when you've got 7 gears between 4th, 5th, 6th, sometimes it can get a little bit confusing as to which gear you're in, so it would be nice just to have a clearer readout. One thing I will say is I think there's an awful lot of promise for a more track-focused variant of the Vantage. All the groundwork has been very thoroughly laid. Oh my. Oh. Overall, yeah, I like this. This is a laugh.
I found myself really enjoying the Vantage, even if its on-track dynamics weren't quite perfect. For me, it felt like an Aston should, and I reckon there's a lot of promise for future, more focused variants of this car. And actually, speaking of more focused variants, let me introduce you to the BMW M4 CS. It builds on the already highly entertaining M4 with more power, a little less weight, and hopefully more fun.
So this is the M4 CS, it's the meat in the M4, an M4 CSL sandwich. It's less aggressive than the CSL, which is more track focused and rear wheel drive, and more aggressive than the M4. So could be the sweet spot somewhere in between. And we've got more power from this fantastic 3-litre twin-turbo straight six. I absolutely adore this engine. I didn't like it when it was first in the last M3 that went turbo. I always say this every time I drive them, but the step forward with this engine, with this generation, is just astonishing really. It's so much better, really smooth, but it's the progression, the way it serves up its power. And this car does feel significantly quicker than the regular M4. It's just got some real punch, builds from low down, and it's got some real fire in its belly as you rev it out. Now the chassis definitely feels like a step on as well from the M4. The steering has, it's got more of a lightness to it, there's more feel to it, feels more agile and responsive. Now let's just take it through this fairly tricky sort of left-right flick with 4-wheel drive sports here. The way these things just put their power down, all that horsepower, feels rear-wheel drive, but it just soaks up that power. I'm going through here, full throttle. It's got a rear-wheel drive feeling, but just with monster grip. Gear shifts I prefer in the second setting, not quite as aggressive. We're only on the Michelin Pilot Sport 4S tyres here, not the full aggression of a Cup 2 or something like that. So that's maybe compromised it a little bit, but it's still got a lot of lateral load that you can put into this car. The cornering forces, it just soaks all that up as well. So obviously it is different from the 911, but in terms of what it demands from you as a driver, the demands are lower. I suppose it does more for you, but it just means that you end up going faster everywhere. And I imagine as a point-to-point machine, this would absolutely leave the 911 for dead. Brake pedal feel is a little bit soft, but that just helps you modulate them. I think there's not an instant kind of bite, but they're very strong. They feel some, so you can kind of ease off like that, and it's just lightness to that steering, the way it's tucking into that apex. Really good, really big step on from the M4, as you expect for all the extra money they command, but it also probably makes the CSL look a little bit irrelevant, especially say if we'd have put this on the most aggressive tyres, it would have been an absolute weapon on this track. Even so, it is mind-blowingly quick at points. So a little bit sideways there in four-wheel drive sports, and the absolute fury of this thing down the straight. Wow, it is quick. It is a really quick car. I was a bit late into there. The rear end could have overtaken itself then, but it didn't. Again, that stability that allows you to drive so quickly. Well, I don't want it to sound like, maybe it's too easy to drive this car quickly. It's still really exciting and really involving to drive, but just in a very different way to the 911. For a front engine car, the way it turns in and holds its line is very, very impressive. Absorbs that curb really well. Even in a stiffer suspension setting, you get onto the curb and it'll just take that really, really nice. As a daily car, as something that's super, super kind of practical and usable, but then can step up when you really want it to. This will take some beating, I reckon.
Ben is a bit of a BMW man, but even by his standards, he absolutely adored the M4 CS. And whether you love or hate the way it looks, there surely can't be any doubt that there's an exciting, hugely accomplished performance car underneath, and possibly the finest variant so far on the G82. Next up though, we've got another front-engined rear-wheel drive sports car, but that's probably just about where the similarities end. Welcome to the 2024 Ford Mustang GT, which incidentally drove all the way to and from the UK for this test without missing a beat. So, it's already off to a very good start. But what's it like on track?
So this is the Mustang GT. It's the entry-level Mustang 6-speed manual, 5-litre V8. It's not the dark horse, cheapest Mustang you can buy, and it's absolutely brilliant. Now, the reason we didn't bring the dark horse was partly because I didn't think there was enough differentiation for the extra money for the dark horse, so this is a real value champion, this car. It's ultimate bang for your buck. That big 5-litre V8, naturally aspirated. You can hear how charismatic it is. We've got this manual shifter as well, which I think feels a bit nicer than the different unit that you've got in the dark horse. So all in, this is a really strong package. Now, it is quite soft. I drove it on the road last night and thought, I wonder how this is going to translate to the track. And actually, it's doing really well. It's still got that soft, doughy feel to it. But I'm in track mode now, and it's holding sort of lateral load, going around, and putting its power down really well. It's not got loads and loads of torque because it's naturally aspirated, even though it's got a big-chested V8. But it puts its power down really well. And actually, because it's a front-engined rear-wheel drive car, it's very, very easy to get in and just drive very quickly on a circuit like this. As you tip it into a corner like this, it feels nice and stable actually. You can take liberties with it and kind of roll it in like that. It just grips foot flat to the floor and it'll just hold it. So it's not really a hooligan, but it's got that real sort of muscle to it, and you have to really provoke it to make it go sideways and to sort of give you a bit of a scare maybe. This is a much more competent car than the last generation Mustang. It works well on the road. I think it's doing surprisingly well on track. I think this would be my choice. If I was going to get a Mustang, I would just get the entry-level GT with a manual gearbox. Just do not make cars like this anymore. feels like a big car. It feels like it's heavy. You've got a really wide cockpit, but it's really comfortable, really comfy seats. You could do mega miles in this, and Piers drove it all the way down from the UK, said it was a great cruiser, and then, you know, as a car to drive on the road most of the time, and then do the occasional track day. I think this is really good value for money. It's got enough compliance to ride these curbs as well, so that softness comes into its own when you sort of step up like that. It doesn't get bounced off line. So actually, even though it's not the last word in precision, it's surprisingly effective. I just love how you can really dig into this power. Just put your foot flat down, and unless you provoke it, it's just going to soak it up. Look at that, it's soaking it all up with all that lock applied. It's really impressive. I'm so glad they still make this car. It's totally out of step with the times, and it's all the better for it.
Mustang done, we now move into a car that couldn't be more in step with the times, namely the all-electric Hyundai Ioniq 5N. This is the first time we've had an EV on our sports car giant test, and it's here because it won our electric sports car giant test earlier this year. But can it really hold a candle to the finest and most exhilarating petrol-powered cars?
So we're pretty familiar with the Hyundai Ioniq 5N now. We drove it in South Korea, we've driven it in the UK, and now we're driving it on circuit. And the thing about this car is that it's absolutely packed with gadgets and gizmos. You can see I'm using the NE shift now, so it simulates gear shifts, and it works really well. However, on a track, there's only so far that those gadgets will get you, because it is the best way to expose a big heavy car, and this thing, it is heavy. It's over 2.2 tons. So the big question is, can it handle itself? Is it still good fun, or does it feel like a bit of a mess? Well, you know what? It might not be the last word in feel or the kind of fingertippy driving that you might get with something a ton lighter, but it's still enormous fun. I mean, coming into this corner now, it's a nice left-right switch, and it just feels so unbelievably playful, as you can see. It never feels like it's too intimidating. It never feels like that weight is getting away from you. It's clearly there. It's clearly there, but it's doing exactly what I want it to. Everything happens in slow motion. The breakaway from grip, the slide, getting the grip back. It rotates coming into the corners, it rotates coming out of the corners. The gears give you that kind of engagement that you don't usually get with electric cars. And I tell you what, the big thing that really stands out is that the speed is not the be-all and end-all. I'm barely noticing it. That's usually the thing that electric cars are known for, being rapid in a straight line. But in this, I don't care how quick it is in a straight line. I'm not thinking about that. I'm thinking how much fun it is to drive through the corners. We've said it before, and we'll say it again. This thing, it isn't just fun for an EV. It's fun, full stop. I think just adding a bit of balance in the slower stuff, it can be hard to keep it tidy. You've really got to manage it. If you want to go sideways, fine, it's great at that, but if you want to be tidy, needs a bit of management. It's not the last word in finesse, and you could have more feel through the controls, but other than that, it is such a laugh.
Clearly, I was really enjoying myself in the Ioniq 5N. It won't be to everyone's taste, and it isn't perfect, but for Hyundai's first electric performance car to deliver on this scale is a monumental achievement.
Before we move on to the final 4 cars, a quick word about our circuit for this year's Sports Car Giant test. The Goodyear Miraval Proving Ground was built 50 years ago, but it wasn't until 1984 that it was bought by the famous tyre company. And since then, they've invested millions and conducted hundreds of thousands of individual tyre tests. The high-performance track that we're on is 2 miles long and contains just about every kind of corner you could wish for. It really is the ultimate playground. And with that in mind, let's get back to it in a more traditional hot hatch, namely the freshly updated VW Golf GTI Clubsport.
So this is the Golf GTI Clubsport. So it's one step up from the GTI, but below the Golf R in the range. So the idea is it's just got a bit more track day focus, a bit sharper than the regular GTI. But I'm also hoping it's got more attitude and more feel than the Golf Marquet R estate that I had as a long termer, which was a bit numb for my liking. That's the only purely front wheel drive hatch we've got with us this year. So the Yaris is 4-wheel drive, the Hyundai is 4-wheel drive as well. But front-wheel drive hot hatches, when they're properly set up, they can be really satisfying. They can be very reassuring to push hard, very sort of faithful and easy to chuck around. And this is the first time I've driven this car on track as I'm speaking to you right now. It does feel very good, actually. I like the steering, how precise it is. The front tyres are keying in really nicely. It's holding the lateral load nicely as well when you lean it into a corner like that. I'm in track mode. I feel kind of confident straight away to be up on these curbs here and pushing as hard as I can in this car, and that's a really good sign. I think it does have a more connected feel than other Mark 8s I've had before this facelift, so they've obviously just sharpened this car up, given it a bit more of an edge, given it more teeth really. But it's the sort of car that you could drive very quickly round a track, keep up with probably a lot more powerful stuff that was driven by maybe people who weren't quite as good as they thought they were, and embarrass them really, which is, you know, it is quite satisfying, isn't it? Let's be honest. But look, keeping into this apex here, holds its line nicely as long as you're reasonably patient. See if it's adjustable there. See if I get into some corners, and it's quite a neutral. It's quite a neutral balance, I would say. It's not that throttle responsive. Yeah, it's pretty neutral. You're not going to get it dancing all over the place like an old Renault Sport hot hatch. So no sort of lift-off oversteer heroics, really, I would say. It's got a lot of lateral grip. It's got a nice bit of attitude from this engine. I like the steering. I think as a package, it works really well. This is a fast section here. Just being able to lean on that front end. I think other cars, when I backed off just then, probably would have tried to swap ends. So that neutrality in faster stuff, it's not a bad thing. It's maybe a bit boring in the slower stuff, but for a fast place like this, or mostly fast place, actually it does come into its own. DSG is really good as well. Those downshifts, you can't get a manual, but this is very good for track work. Certainly if you were, you know, going to the Nürburgring for the first time, something like that, this would be a really good car to do it in. More teeth than the GTI, but still kind of safe and predictable without being, you know, without being too wild at all. There's this fast up here. Even lifting off there wasn't the greatest bit of driving there. I lifted off, and it's sort of covering up my mistakes really. So that's what you want from something like a Golf, and it's nice that it's just got that extra sort of edge to it without throwing away everything that the Golf sort of stands for. Nice kind of juicy power delivery, so it likes to rev this engine, but it's also got some nice kind of juicy torque in the mid-range that can haul you out of a corner. Very flexible, and then you just know that you can live with this car and it'll be absolutely fantastic. So these seats, for instance, I love these seats, the comfort of this car. They've improved the infotainment, so as an all-rounder, it's not the most exciting car here, but as an all-rounder, the Golf GTI Clubsport is very satisfying indeed, I'd say.
Granted, you probably saw that verdict coming. In its many iterations, the Golf GTI has seldom blown our mind for sheer excitement, but its all-round ability and attainability still holds strong. Now though, please observe a totally different take on the hot hatch genre. Introducing the new Toyota GR Yaris. It's a compact all-wheel drive B-road rocket ship that we were hugely impressed by when it first came out in 2020. 4 years later, it's had a significant update, and with the Fiesta ST and Hyundai i20N now off sale, there really is nothing else that comes close.
So, welcome to the Toyota GR Yaris, and we absolutely loved this car when it first came out, and this updated version for track use should be even better. It's got the previously Japan-only cooling pack now fitted as standard. It's also got the circuit pack included as standard, and they've made a few changes aside from that as well. So you've got stiffer springs all round, you've got an uprated front anti-roll bar, stiffer body, the gear ratio should be closer together. There's the ability to send more power to the rear wheels in track mode. Have they made a difference? Yeah. I think the changes are most obvious. Just coming into a corner, there's more bite from the outside front wheel when you just lean it in. It feels like it's got more ability through the corners, and you can really lean on it and do what you want to do in a hot hatch, which is absolutely send it and not worry too much about the consequences, because, well, it's a hot hatch, you can do that, right? Now this car weighs under 1,300 kilograms, so it's about a ton lighter than the Ioniq 5N. But something I've noticed while driving it on track is that coming into the braking zones, there's not as much rotation as I'd like. With front wheel drive cars, you want them to be trying to swap ends to some degree, just so that you can get that initial turn in. It's what the Fiesta ST did brilliantly, but with this, it feels very, very tied down. Now that's great for a lap time, but it's not ideal for having fun. And it does mean that if you're not careful, there's plenty of potential for understeer. On the road, that's great, but on the track, when you've got more space to really throw it around, you kind of want to see just a little bit more playfulness. It is a hot hatch after all. I love the engine though. It's got plenty of grunt, low down torque, but it revs. Unlike a lot of 3-cylinders, it really revs. I think through these slower corners, you've really just got to calm it down, short shift, use the torque to pull your way out, and that's when you get the most out of it. It's good, it's very capable, very effective, it's brilliant fun, and I suspect on road it's unbeatable, but out here when you've got a bit more space, yeah, I'd like just to see a bit more.
And now onto the final two cars of the test, both of which are completely different from each other and indeed anything else on this test. And we'll start with the latest version of the McLaren Artura Spider. It's the most powerful and the fastest car here, but does that mean it's also the most exciting?
So back in 2022 on Cars Sports Car Giant Test, we were supposed to have the original Artura, but for whatever reason it didn't work out, so we got the 765 LT instead. But funnily enough, that car won. It was absolutely brilliant, and it definitely worked in McLaren's favour, because the original Artura just felt a bit, well, unfinished, unfortunately. But now they've updated it, and the headline improvements are better engine mounts, faster responding dampers, more power from the internal combustion unit, faster gear shifts, and a few other bits as well. And the upshot of all of that is what now feels like a really well-sorted supercar. When I drove this car on road at the launch, I thought it was fantastic, and now on the track, it doesn't in any way feel out of its depth. It's got that wonderful McLaren pointiness and precision. It's ballistically quick. It sounds better than it did before. 230 kph down this front straight here. The brake pedal feel, that is a hell of a lot better than it previously was. There's so much more going on underneath your foot, and it's much more consistent. They've managed to make it work as it should. Because I remember the Ferrari 296 that had hybrid regen in the brakes, that had better brake feel than this. Now, not so sure it does. Yeah, wonderfully precise. Brakes are super powerful. The ABS is really nice and intuitive, so you can feel when it kicks in, but it doesn't feel like that horrible rumbly pedal feel. It gives you a really good sensation of what the wheels are doing. And what's also lovely is the balance on this car. Earlier on, the track was a bit damp, and that meant you could really play with this car at quite low speeds, and on the way into corners you had to manage the rear end a bit on the weight transfer, but once you were into the corner you could really play with the throttle and adjust the balance, and it was nice and intuitive. And the variable drift control really helped with that. It allows you to drive a supercar such as this, and it just felt like a big sports car. And I think that's what really stands out about the Artura, is it's hugely powerful, it's hugely capable, but it doesn't feel too intimidating. It lets you build up to its enormous potential and really explore it at your own speed. Oof. I'm still not convinced that McLaren steering feel now is as good as it used to be in some of their cars from a few years back. I remember the 765 LT in 2022 having just a bit more going on, but I'd feel fairly confident in saying this is still one of the best steering feels on this test. And the driving position in this, I mean, for me, it's pretty much unmatched. You've got such a great sense of where you are in the car, and that, above all else, gives you huge faith and confidence. I think Aston Martin could learn a thing or two about how McLaren displays their gears. Got a really big orange number in front of me which tells me exactly what ratio I'm in, no doubt about it. I don't think I'm grinning and gurning like an idiot as much as I was in the Ioniq 5N, but I think that's probably because I'm maybe concentrating a little bit harder. We're carrying an awful lot more speed. The limits are higher. You've got to be on it, but if you are, this thing rewards you by the gallon. Oh. The Artura is finally what it should have been in the first place.
So McLaren gets it right at the second time of asking. The Artura Spider is absolutely in with a shout of winning this entire test. But before we declare the winner, here's another car that's now into its second generation, namely the Ariel Nomad. And all I can say here is full credit to Ben and the rest of the team for driving this incredible car all the way from England in all kinds of hideous weather.
So now for something completely different. This is the new Ariel Nomad, the second generation. Basically an all-new car, all-new frame, and it's switched to a Ford engine for this car, 2.3 litre turbocharged engine. Got a windscreen in front of me, but everything else around me is all open. We've driven this car all the way from England, which is quite an adventure. It's very much road focused for an off-road car, out of its natural habitat here on track really, and it's such a lot of fun. This engine's got so much torque load out, really pulls it along. Nice close ratio gearbox as well. And it just feels really kind of alive in your hands and on these tyres. Really quick as well. Lovely, lovely steering on it, very precise and feels so. Love the fact that you can just see everything, all the wheels, all the brake discs, the suspension as you're just driving around, all moving. It's the absolute antidote to all safety assist systems. It's just you and the car and the road. I had got a little bit of electronic sort of gizmo here. If I turn this, I'm in race mode now, so I get more power. It's in a road setting, so the suspension's not rolling that much. But it's got much more roll than any of the other cars. What an awesome thing! Wow! Well, I hope you could hear that, but this thing is it's just so alive with mechanical energy and feel, the steering, the engine, the brakes, the way you can see everything around you, the way you're so exposed to the elements. It's on a road setup here, but it's still quite soft versus anything else. So it's moving around, it's on off-road tyres. It's not really in its natural habitat out there, but what a lot of fun this car is. I absolutely love it.
For me, the Nomad gives possibly the biggest hit of adrenaline of any of the cars here today, and that's before you even think about taking it off-road. But as a single car, it asks you to compromise far more than our actual top three from this test, namely the BMW M4 CS, the Porsche 911 ST, and the McLaren Artura Spider.
We've chosen our podium on the basis that these three cars deliver the most rewarding driving experience of this year's contenders. The M4 CS is a brilliant all-rounder, brushing aside huge distances and switchable weather conditions like no other car, while still producing the kind of laugh-out-loud, tyre-burning feels you'd expect from BMW's M Division. It's fast, confidence-inspiring, and, despite its weight, beautifully responsive.
Meanwhile, the Artura Spider is something of a reconfirmation that the original was merely a blip in McLaren's ability to produce world-beating sports cars. The steering, the driving position, the unerring precision, they all come together to make the Artura Spider a wonderfully thrilling but usable drop-top supercar.
But when it comes down to it, the Porsche 911 ST takes the win by a whisker. At low speeds it can be loud, awkward and even overwhelming. Yet the beauty of this car is how it reveals more of its irresistible appeal every time you get behind the wheel.
It eggs you on, pushes you to dig deeper into its vast talents and rewards you with just about everything you could possibly wish for in the perfect sports car. The Porsche 911 ST is our 2024 Sports Car Giant Test winner.